Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Haskin Cast podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, and man, this is such a great week for me releasing shows because not only did I have an absolutely fantastic time talking to Jerry Fielden, I've also got next week coming up another interview with another member of AraPacis, as well as my review of the album Waterdog with some commentary from members of the band. Very excited to release that next week. However, before we do that, if you haven't listened to my interview with Jerry, go back and do that. Or if you want to listen to this interview with David and go back and listen to the interview with Jerry after, both absolutely fantastic guys. Had a blast talking to both of them. I have kind of an ongoing interview with David because we've had to schedule this a little bit in chunks. And, but boy, the conversation is just fantastic. The stories he's got, just amazing. And I can't wait until we get to catch up a little bit more. And hopefully I'll have some more for you guys soon. But I would say that this is part one of, at least a couple of interviews that I'll get in with David. You're going to have a blast listening to him. He is so energetic, so passionate about music, so talented, but he's got some great stories too. And we're going to get into all of that right now. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to say I'm pretty excited because this is very much a bucket list item for me to be able to interview this very talented gentleman. He's had quite a career, and we're going to dig into all of it here. David Stone. David, how are you?
Oh, I'm remarkably well, Scott. Thank you very much. It's a beautiful, beautiful day in Vancouver, Canada.
I have never been to Vancouver. I've been to Montreal. I've been to Toronto, where you're from, but I have never been to Vancouver. I've heard it's just gorgeous.
It's our San Francisco, basically. It's right on the ocean. We got mountains surrounding us, and you can go skiing and swimming the same day. It's incredible. I just love it here. It's the air's great. The weather's, it never gets too cold. And
sure. Oh, that's good.
It just makes for a great lifestyle for someone who doesn't have a lot of money.
Well, that's a good, but it just sounds like paradise. It sounds like it has all the components you could possibly want.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a hobo's paradise, no doubt. I studied in the conservatory when I was 5 years old.
Wow.
If it wasn't perfect, it was wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's some hardcore learning right there.
Well, yeah, the conservatory was, you either got it 100% right or it was wrong.
Yeah.
It was no like, hey, that's pretty good. There was none of that.
Right. Do you find that you still hold yourself to that standard, or have you been able to loosen
up a little bit?
Absolutely.
My father was a phenomenal musician. Unbelievable. Literally unbelievable musician. Mm-hmm. And I've always... even when I was 5, 6 years old, I was listening to classical and jazz, and the technical ability of those musicians. Very, very rarely in rock and roll did I ever find anybody who was up to the level of musician that I was used to when I was 6 or 7 years old.
Isn't that crazy?
Well, I thought it was kind of weird, like the average musician in 1950 was a way better musician than the average musician from 1980.
Mm-hmm. Is that because most of them didn't really get trained properly?
Well, not trained at all. I mean, as soon as rock and roll hit, you got all these guys who they can play 3 chords and that's about it. Mm-hmm. Or some basic blues and 3 chords and that's it.
Right.
Whereas, the average musician in 1940 could read music. Great.
Sure. It became let's start a band, not let's learn how to be good instrumentalists.
Let's learn how to play, period. I know, I don't mean to be rude here, but,
sure.
By the time I was 13, I was studying for grade 10, that's as far as you can go. And then you get what's called an ASCT. And then you're done with the conservatory. You're either a concert pianist or you got a degree, a certificate so that you could teach. Mm-hmm. And, and there I am 15 years old and I'm in my first band. Nobody in the band can read music.
Wow. Right.
So I learned very quickly how to deal with people like guitar players and bass players who couldn't read music. So I ended up learning how to play guitar just so I could show other guitar players, like parts of the song that they wouldn't understand.
Oh, that's a good idea. Was keys your first instrument?
Yeah, piano. I was,
Piano.
yeah,
Mhm.
studying.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah, I really went basically through the whole thing. I dropped out just before my ARCT,
Hmm.
but by then I could play whatever I want with both hands.
Sure.
Like, no, I just want to play.
You can be in school forever, and at some point you have to say, okay, it's time to take what I've learned and go start living this.
Well, that was the great part about it was my parents. Like my parents, in the early 1950s or middle 1950s, they were progressive. They were post Second World War liberal. They did believe that kids should go to, take dance lessons or music lessons or, acting lessons or, they were just those kind of parents. So, they got me in the conservatory when I was 5 years old. And the guy who taught me, they just really lucked out when they put me in the conservatory. I got this great piano teacher who also taught ballet and was a composer. He wrote all the music for Babar the Elephant, the original full length kids thing. I don't know if you heard of that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, my piano teacher wrote all the music.
Wow.
And he also wrote the theme for, I don't remember the Canadian children's show, Mr. Dress Up.
I've heard the name, but I don't think I've seen it.
Yeah, it had this really complicated little piano music for the theme music for the show. And he wrote that as well. And so by luck, I got this great musician who was a really nice guy. And I just flourished in classical music. I would always get first class honors, and at the end of the year, they would put on a recital, and so they would take the best kids from each level, and they would perform one piece. So I did about 3 or 4 different recitals for the conservatory, and my parents were just thrilled. Like a convocation hall. I would have to wear a black suit, and my parents would be all dressed up, and I go walk onto a huge stage at the University of Toronto, sit down on a grand piano. My feet wouldn't even touch the ground.
Wow.
And I would play because I was considered the best musician, the best student on the grade 4 level or the grade 5 level, grade 6, grade 7. I think I did 3 or 4 of them, and I still have all my certificates.
Wow.
But yeah, by the time I was 15, if you played me a piece of music, like any Beatles song or anything by Beach Boys or anything like that, and if you asked me how it went, I would play it for you.
Wow.
Because I could do that by then. And by the time I was 15, not only could I play it for you, I could ask you, what key would you like me to play it in? And I could play it in whatever key you wanted. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's how good the training was with the conservatory. Well, most people didn't like the conservatory. Like, they'd go for a few years and then they would quit because it was just too hard.
Yeah.
But I had a great teacher, and I was obviously a natural musician. So I just flew through the conservatory.
It takes the right mindset to be able to sustain a tough environment, but I think having the support of your teacher and your parents.
Yeah, and I didn't find it tough at all. I thought it was easy. And my piano teacher, he just jumped grades. When I went to the conservatory, I went to grade 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I didn't do 3, 5, 7, and 9 because he figured, oh, don't bother, you don't need to. So I just jumped grades like that.
That says a lot.
yeah, but like I said, by the time I was 16 years old, I could play anything you wanted me to play, basically, in music. Back then, music was like, like rock and roll bands. There was never any charts. There was never any notation. So it's like everyone had to use their ear, or they would write a fake charts. You just have a chord symbol, and you use a slash for a bar. And I don't know if you ever heard of a book called The Real Book.
No.
But it's a book for all jazz musicians, and it's a play on words, because originally in the 1940s and 50s, a piano player would have to work with a lot of different singers, but a lot of them, they would sing the same songs, and back then they would refer to them as standards. Like Since I Fell for You, Autumn Leaves, God Bless the Child. Don't Get Around Much Anymore. I mean, these are all standards. Billie Holiday or Ella Fitzgerald or Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett. Back then, you would carry around a big binder of handwritten charts, and you would only write the lead line down, and then you would write chord symbols, and you would use slash marks for the bars, and they were called fake books, and everybody would have them in the 1940s and 50s, and just in order to work with different singers, but they would, they would always want to sing the same songs. So everybody had fake books. So finally somebody got the idea of printing one, even though it's illegal, because in order to print music, you got paper publishing. So the books were illegal because the publishing didn't get paid to the writers of the songs when somebody would write these fake books out. So now all the kids who go to college, music colleges, they buy this book called The Real Book. And it's just a printed fake book from the 1950s that has all the standards in it. And that's what people use now.
Right. I had wondered if that was the play on words, because I worked in a musical instrument store, and we sold a lot of fake books. And as soon as you said The Real Book, that was the first thing that popped into my head.
Yeah. The most common one is called The Real Book, and it's in parentheses, referring to the fact that it's just a very good fake book. It is sort of the fake book now. But yeah, I mean, by the time I realized that I wanted to be a musician, which was very early on, like 12 or 13 years old, I realized there's no money in it, and I would have to sort of jump ship a lot. Like if somebody wanted me, and they would have to pay me, and I would, write fake charts, show other musicians in the group how music went, and ended up working with, like as a teenager, working with agents, because they're like, oh man, I could use you in this group, or I need you to work with these guys and clean up their arrangements and stuff like that.
Right.
So I ended up like doing quite well as a musician as a teenager.
Did you do a lot of sessions as well?
Well, that came later, but back then all the work was in bars, 6 nights a week playing in bars. And I'm talking about the 1960s. In fact, where I grew up in Toronto, there was a law saying that if you owned a bar and it had strippers in it, that they had to dance to live music. They couldn't dance to a record.
Wow.
Or a recording. So this is back in the 1960s. So I'm hearing I'm 17 years old, and I'm getting work in a strip club at 17.
Wow. Talk about living the dream.
Well, yeah, no kidding, man. Yeah, so here I am at strip clubs in Toronto. I think they're all gone now. But in the late 60s, Toronto was a big city, so there was a good 2 dozen strip clubs. And a lot of them, you're going to find this hilarious, they would have a Hammond organ, a big Hammond organ in them. And that I don't know if you know about Hammond organs, but they come with a big tall speaker cabinet called a Leslie, and it's got speakers that spin inside.
I've moved a few of those before. They're quite heavy.
Okay, so all right, so there you go. almost all the major strip clubs in Toronto in the late 60s had a Hammond organ in them with two Leslies, hanging up on shelves on the wall.
Wow.
And the band would always be an organ trio, which would be organ, guitar, and drums, no bass. The guy playing Hammond had to play bass on the Hammond, either with bass pedals or with the lower manual. And so I got really good at that as a teenager, playing bass on the Hammond as I'm playing in a little three-piece jazz combo, backing up strippers. And there's a famous guitar player, I don't know if you've heard of John Scofield.
I have heard the name.
Yeah, his last couple of albums used the same format. Here we are 50 years later. His last two records are organ trio records, like Hammond, guitar, and drums.
Wow.
Same with Jimmy Reed. Jimmy Smith. All his stuff was a trio. It was him, Wes Montgomery, and the drummer was Grady Tate.
Is it just me, or was a Hammond organ kind of an odd choice at that time for a strip club to have, because it was really a blues organ back then?
Well, we played all blues music. That's what they danced to.
Okay.
Yeah. They didn't dance to, like, we weren't playing like the latest pop records. We were playing mostly R&B. Like Wilson Pickett, Sam and Dave, Otis Redding, R&B.
Wow.
Because that was dance music in the 60s.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Wow. This is really some eye-opening stuff here, I got to tell you.
Well, it was quite an introduction to to music as a 17-year-old. I got to tell you that. Okay, I got my coffee. That went great.
Such a vital component for me.
I didn't kill anybody. All right. Where are you, Scott? You in Montreal?
No, I'm in Las Vegas.
Oh, wow. Cool. I've been to Vegas.
Oh, it's such a crazy town.
I lost my shirt in Vegas, man. I crawled out of there with like $200. I spent 4 years in Mexico playing piano at the Westin Hotel in Cabo San Lucas, the Westin Regina. Mm-hmm. I had a contract there, playing. They had this big, huge lounge with a grand piano, and I played there 5 nights a week for 2 years. And the summer, the second summer, I took off. I worked the full year through the whole summer in Mexico the first time, the first season, and it was insane how hot it was. So the next summer, I just got out for a couple of months, and I was playing around Colorado and the southwestern United States with a guy named Brian Flynn, who's now in the Music Hall of Fame in Mexico.
Oh, nice.
And we would gig around all over California, Colorado, and Vegas. Vegas was the last. We had a week in Vegas, and then I had to go back down to Cabo San Lucas, which from Vegas is about a 1,500-mile drive. Mm-hmm. And I barely made it. I had to borrow $20 in this town about 100 miles north of Cabo San Lucas from a tourist so I can get back to work. Yeah, I got cleaned out in Vegas.
Yeah, that does tend to happen quite a bit here.
Yeah, about $1,500 in about a period of 4 or 5 days.
Well, some people are doing that in 4 or 5 minutes.
Oh, I bet. No doubt. Even the very first album I ever did, I was only 21 years old. It was with A&M Records in 1975, and the band had a really weird name. It was called Symphonic Slam, SLAM, Symphonic Slam. I never liked the name of the band, but it was signed to A&M Records, and George Simke produced that in 75, and that was very technical. Like there was no bass guitar in the album; it was all done with synthesizers.
Oh,
and I was using all the latest stuff that you can get your hands on in 1975, and multi-layering synthesizer tracks to build up polyphonic synthesizer parts. Because polyphonic synthesizers hadn't even been invented yet. Like every synthesizer you can get your hands on it, would only play one note at a time.
Right. Yeah.
So I would end up mostly using ARP and Moog and building tracks up, which was a very slow process. But you would get that big sound at the end, and
I mean, obviously, Rainbow was a huge part of your career, but it seems like the album "Long Live Rock and Roll" was made under very bizarre circumstances, because you've got Tony Carey, who was fired but was hired back to do some of the sessions. Then you were brought in to play on some of the songs. Bob Daisley played on some.
We were basically working for Ritchie Blackmore Incorporated, and so I just, I was really young. When I got signed to the band, I was 23.
Wow.
No, 23 or 24. So I was the youngest guy by about 9 or 10 years before the next oldest guy. So I was the baby.
Well, if I have it right, and please tell me if this is wrong, but I have it that you played on LA Connection, The Shed, Kill the King, and you co-wrote Gates of Babylon.
Oh man, I pretty well, yeah. I mean, I was very upset by that. The manager, Bruce Payne, the Pretends talent, who also handles Deep Purple and some other acts like Whitesnake and that, he just turned around and said to me, "Well, that was great work in the studio, but we're not going to give you any publishing.
What?
We're just going to steal it from you, but we'll give you money instead." And they gave me all the mechanical points for the whole album, which was cool.
Oh, that's
so
good.
I still get it to this day, but I didn't get the songwriting credit, which, that happens a lot,
Yeah. It's a shame though, because it's just not right to not credit people for the work that they did.
Oh yeah, a great example is Katie Lang. I don't know if you know who Katie Lang is.
Oh yeah, she's a beautiful singer.
Yeah, well, she's all right. Her biggest hit was a song called "Constant Craving."
Mm-hmm, I love that song.
Well, a friend of mine wrote that song. His name is Gordy Matthews, and he's just an incredibly talented guy with a huge voice. He's like a guy who should have been in the Eagles. He's one of those kind of guys.
Okay.
Their management said, if you don't give us, I think it was 35% of the publishing, we will not record the song. Even though he wrote the song. Not only did he write the whole song, but the harmonies is his arrangement. The guitar playing is him. I mean, it's basically a Gordy Matthews record with Katie Lang singing. Wow. But he had to give up a third of the publishing.
That's crazy. I remember hearing an interview with Roger Glover from Deep Purple where he was talking about early on when he had joined the band, he had done some work on a song for a friend of his and he really didn't think much of it. And Deep Purple's management found out and said, no, we own everything that you do.
Well, yeah, it depends on what kind of paper you sign, Like when I signed my first contract, it was with A&M Records. And I had just turned 22. And they gave me a $6,000 signing bonus, which was very nice.
Yeah.
And, 22-year-old kid in 1975, I got $6,000 in my hand. I didn't, which I did not have to pay back. It was against future earnings. But they also tied up 5 years of my publishing. Mm-hmm. So if I wrote things, they would get 50% of it. And that was just the way life went back then. I mean, the music business is not a very nice business. I mean, it's a lot better now because of attrition. The big record companies don't have a lot of money anymore. They don't get these budgets like Fleetwood Mac spending $1 million to record Rumors. Like that doesn't happen anymore. Yeah. So things are maybe a little more on the up and up. But it's always been a ruthless business full of crooks.
Well, the one song that I haven't been able to identify a keyboard player on is Sensitive Delight. Was that one you played on?
Yeah, I don't know. Okay. I mean, we were in a castle north of Paris. Mm-hmm. I'm 24 years old. I've been on the road for almost 3 and a half months I've been on the road. And before that, it was a month of rehearsals, a week of auditioning, 2 weeks of rehearsal in LA, and then a week rehearsals in England at Shepperton. And then touring Europe for 2 months, touring England for a month, and then straight to the studio. So I didn't see a single person I knew, or even a single Canadian, for like over 6-7 months. Wow. And they're stuck in a castle an hour and a half north of Paris with fucking nothing to do. Like, so boring. And everybody was just, because they're so bored, senseless, because Richie just being alone in the studio with the engineer. Yeah, Richie played all the bass guitar on the whole album. Now, that's one thing that's true. Like, Bob Daisley thinks he might be on a track or two, or the other bass player, Jimmy Bain. But no, Richie played all the bass on the whole album.
Oh, wow.
And they would play me tracks, him and Martin Birch. And I go in, when it was my turn to go in the studio, there's Martin Birch, the producer, sitting there with Blackmore. They would play me tracks that Tony did that they didn't like. And they'd say, well, what would you do here? And I would show them stuff, and they go, oh, okay, we like that. And then I would end up replacing tracks. And then Blackmore and I started with the basic bones, the groove, actually, I guess you could say, for Gates of Babylon. Mm-hmm. Now, we did that, recorded that. The whole track was recorded, just the drums and me playing like a ghost bass track on a Moog synthesizer, and then I would do like you hear on a R&B or a funk record, like a Stevie Wonder, you'd hear clavinet and the Moog bass sort of weaving, and you can hear that in Gates of Babylon. So it was Cozy Powell and I, the drummer, we recorded the whole bed track. Like, we played the whole thing, just the two of us. Mm-hmm. And then I would build the tracks up with, organ, and I had a keyboard that sounded like a choir called an orchestron. Me and Patrick Moraz were sponsored by them. And so you'd hear this choir, you hear these strings. I actually ended up arranging some string parts for members of the Munich Symphony.
Wow.
And all, like I said, the bass was originally done with a Moog synthesizer, and then he just doubled it up with a bass guitar in the rock parts.
So, are the strings that we hear in the actual studio recording, is that you playing, or did they overdub that with an actual string section?
The parts I wrote and I played on the orchestron, that they brought in 2 violins, a viola, and a cello, a basic string section that they could double up, and they just played the parts that I recorded so they would sound more realistic.
Wow. It's such a brilliant song.
I mean, it's a big sounding record. If you listen to it carefully, that's a big sounding record.
Oh, absolutely. It's huge.
Because I was listening to bands at the time like Genesis or Yes or Gentle Giant, that were orchestral bands,
Right. They really knew how to fill out the sound in a piece of music. So the other question I had was that Kill the King was performed live in a very huge way before the album.
It was the first song on every concert I ever played with them. It was the first song we would play.
How did you guys dial it back from the live version to the album version?
And no, it was the other way around.
Oh.
The album version was first, and then with live, it was like, we can't play it at this tempo. It sucks. So we sped it up incredibly live. It was a completely different song by the time we played it live. It had nothing to do with the original.
Right. That's what I thought, too.
That happens a lot in rock and roll. You're in the studio, you come up with this clever bit for a song. You go to play it on stage, and it's just too lame. Like, it doesn't have enough life to it. So you end up speeding tracks up. It was really famous. First time I saw it was when, I don't know if you know the record Stax Volt, the label, that it had all the original R&B people on it, like Otis Redding and Sam and Dave and Wilson Pickett. Mm-hmm. Well, when they toured England in 1965 or 6, it was the first time anybody who played R&B music ever played in England. And You listen to Otis Redding. Otis Redding did a version of Satisfaction by the Rolling Stones. And that was that actually got airplay in the United States in 1965 or 6.
Wow.
The live version is twice the speed. And even like Midnight Hour or, all the old R&B tunes like Knock on Wood and that, the live versions are just like 30-40% faster just to keep them, just to inject energy into them. Yeah, same with Sam Phillips or Jackie Wilson. They get on stage and their tunes would be like just pumped up, just for the sake of making them more,
more alive.
have more energy, just more energetic. I think that's what he figured that people expected from him, was this guy who was over the top,
Yeah, well, he certainly has that reputation.
Well, he would smash a guitar every show. Right. He would get a case of 20 Fenders made in Japan back then. They're worth a lot of money now, but back then he would get them for like $250 a guitar. You get a case of 20 Strats, and every night at the last song he would switch guitars to one of those guitars and just destroy it. Like smash it into pieces, throw it in the audience.
And they went nuts every time, I bet.
Oh yeah, you jump on it. It's a nice thing about being a studied piano player is that I could go and just work by myself, like just play piano. And one time I worked the cruise ships. I played grand piano like 7 days a week on cruise ships. That was cool. I went down to Mexico and I got a contract, and I played 2 years at the Westin Hotel in Cabo San Lucas, the Westin Regina, on a grand piano 5 nights a week. And I just played jazz and blues, and the guys from KLON, the jazz station in Long Beach, the jazz station there, they do transcriptions, recordings, and they try to register every jazz musician in the world. They actually came down and recorded me in Mexico, and I'm now registered at KLON as a jazz musician.
Wow. Did you ever really think of yourself as a jazz musician?
Well, my father was, and I grew up listening to jazz ever since I was like 3 years old. I remember pieces of jazz music from when I was 3 or 4 years old, actually, and the musicians playing it. I wish I had some of those records now. I sorely miss them. Oh, but my father was a to die for musician, and I grew up around great musicians. Like ever since I was like I said, 4 or 5 years old, when I studied at the conservatory.
Well, I remember you telling me when you were working with Rainbow that when you were doing the album, it was really difficult because there was so much downtime and you weren't really near anything.
Oh, I would just sit there for days on end doing nothing.
Right. So what happens when you're on a cruise ship, or you're doing a couple of weeks? Well, when you're doing a couple of weeks in Vegas, you're in Vegas, so you've got a lot of stuff you can do. But when you're down in Mexico, how do you fill the time that's not the 2 hours a day that you're playing?
Well, Mexico, I mean, I when I was playing with the Westin in Mexico, I played 5 nights a week. So basically, it would tie up about 6 hours a day. Got to get there, and I'd always be in a black jacket, and I'd want a half an hour warm up, and it would take me about half an hour either way to get there. But I mean, Mexico, where I was, it was a tourist haven. Oh. So like, there's great snorkeling, there's great restaurants, there's great beaches. I did not suffer in Mexico at all.
Good. What about when you were on tour with Rainbow? Was that a challenge, just going from city to city? Because you've got to fill 21 hours a day.
Well, you know what? That's a great question you ask. Because when I joined Rainbow, it was like, okay, welcome to the big time, kid. We rehearsed at the Columbia lot for, I don't know, almost a month. And like Jackson Browne was rehearsing Running on Empty next door. You know, Toto was rehearsing their first album next door. Stevie Wonder came in and rehearsed songs in the Key of Life, 2 doors down. Jeez. Like the Columbia lot, that's where all the biggest bands would rehearse there, because it was the old film lots from the 1930s and 40s. So you could set up a whole stage, like a whole concert stage. And that's how all these bands would rehearse. We would rehearse on a portable stage that was the same size as the stages we were going to play. We would have the entire monitor system of what we were going to use when we would tour. And you know, Richie Blackmore wasn't the only guy to do this. They were all doing it. All the acts. We were doing all the same thing. You know, rehearsing as if they're on a full size stage, because they basically were. Like it would take me, like I'd walk into the building and my keyboard was over 150 yards away inside the building.
Wow.
Like I couldn't throw a baseball that far and hit my keyboard. I'd have to walk that far to where my keyboard was. Jeez. That's how we rehearsed. But yeah, we get on the road, and I had never traveled like to France or Germany or England or Japan. I'd never done that before. So I'm like, well, don't you guys go to sound check? And they're like, oh no, we don't sound check. I'm like, what? You let the roadie sound check? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, oh no, not me, man. Like as soon as we check in the hotel, I jumped back in the limo and said, take me to the gig right now. And I'd be one of the only band members who would ever go down and sound check my equipment at like 5 in the afternoon or 4 in the afternoon. And the roadies loved it. They were so fucking happy that one guy would show up from the band. They would all stop and come around, give me a hug and say, and they all called me Stoney. That was my nickname. Hey, Stoney. And they were just so fucking thrilled that I would show up, just show up, that they would do anything for me. Like any of the roadies would kill for me. Cherry drugs for me, anything I wanted. You name it, they would have done it. Only because I took the time to show up. And not every time, like maybe 4 times out of 5, but show up at the gig in the afternoon and sound check my gear. And they couldn't get over how amazing that was. And they had it, you know, I still have friends for life that I talk to from back in those days. And it's because I took the time to go down, you know? And I knew that, you know, I don't know, how many times am I going to go to Paris? How many times am I going to go to Nuremberg? How many times am I going to go to Den Haag, you know, in my life? So I made a point at every chance I could. Was like, as soon as I checked in the hotel, get out of the hotel and go walk these great cities. And like, you know, a typical concert tour, you're doing 3 to 4 shows a week. So you got a day off or 2 days off in certain towns. And I would immediately spend the whole day, you know, touring, you know, the cities of Europe or in Japan. I did the same thing, you know. And like, I was the only guy in the band who would do that.
Wow.
And I remember I was in Osaka, and I hope I'm not talking your ear off here, by the way.
No, it's great. I love it.
Oh, okay, great. I'm in Osaka, and it's the head of the Yamaha Music Corporation is in Osaka, right? Now they have their own dedicated building. It's 6 stories, and each story is quite big. It's like maybe each floor is the size of 4 high school gymnasiums, each floor. So the top floor is all their pianos. And I had this, like they told me when I landed in Japan, they gave me this badge, this plastic badge you put on your jacket. And it would say, I am an Udo artist, UDO. And he was the big promoter in Japan. Like he brought in McCartney, he brought in Bob Dylan, and he you know, promoted us. So I had this Udo artist tag on my jacket. The guy, when I get to the 6th floor in the elevator of the Yamaha building, sees this badge and starts bowing profusely, like as if I'm a fucking god. and leads me to to this piano they got on the raised sort of little stage, and it's the best piano Yamaha built. It was like $40,000 at the time. Jeez. He said, "No, you play this piano." So I'm like, fine. I sat there and I played this insanely great piano for about an hour, and the guy was so polite that he hid in the back so I wouldn't see him, that he wouldn't bother me.
Wow.
Like that's how crazy it was. And in Japan, I would literally be the only guy in the band who would leave the hotel. It was just crazy, and how British, especially the British guys, that they're kind of set in their ways, you know.
Well, would you say that you really didn't develop relationships with the people in the band? You kind of just because they wouldn't go with you?
Well, I did. Of course I did. You know, I was the youngest guy in the band by a long shot. Like, I was just turned 24. And these guys are in their 30s. Or Ronnie was almost 40. Ronnie, his girlfriend was John Lord's ex. Right. And her name was Wendy. And they felt a real, like, they kind of adopted me like a little nephew. You know, like, hey, wherever the band went, Wendy and Ronnie were like, you should come with us. So, like, there'd be 2 or 3 limos or cars or whatever. And I would just, wherever we had to go, if it was in a car, and I would just jump in with them. Because they were just, they felt paternal towards me, which was really great, you know?
Yeah, everything that I've heard in either an interview from Ronnie or stories about Ronnie has just shown what a great and considerate person that he was.
Oh, yeah. You know what? After a show, Ronnie would be like, "Hey, Stoney, come with me," and we would go back, like behind the backstage door, and there'd be like 150 people there, and I, like the first time he made me do this, like I didn't know what he had in mind. And then we get out there and there's 200 kids and all they wanted to do was shake hands and just talk to us. That's all they wanted. And it fucking meant the world to them. It meant the world to them. They were so happy they'd be in tears that they had a chance to talk. You know, I had so many musicians, and like Blackmore would always make me do a couple of solos every night. Like they would actually leave the stage and I would have to play by myself. And I had so many keyboard players going, "Oh, fuck, that was incredible, man." Like when you switched over to the mini moves and you did this. And, you know, like guys would ask technical questions. And Ronnie looked at me and winked and said, "Isn't this cool?" I'm like, "This is fucking great, man. This is totally what it's all about."
Yeah.
So we would spend an hour. We would have our own car. And Ronnie was like, "No, every show, Dave, we're going out there behind that backstage door, and we're going to go out there for half an hour, 45 minutes." And I totally understood. Like, this is the right thing to do. These kids live for this. They live for it. So, and I'm sure Ronnie kept that up for his whole career. I would put money on it.
I wouldn't doubt that at all.
That every show that he did that.
That's really, though, that's the thing, because when fans have this weird thing with musicians that they feel like they have some ownership over bands that they like.
Well, they do. I mean, they pay so bloody much to see you, you know, and they buy your albums. Yeah, you know, you're public domain, you know. You owe them. I feel you owe them, you know.
But to be able to meet those people and shake their hand and say thank you, that's such a huge thing, because most people don't ever get access to guys like you. Well,
the thing is, I can't begin to explain to you, Scott, how happy they were that we would show up. Like a lot of bands, I guess they don't show up at all, you know, at the backstage after the show. Mm-hmm. But I can't describe you the look of joy, you know, on guys. It was mostly guys, you know. That kind of music appealed to men more than women. Right. But it meant the world. You could tell it meant the world to them. It was like they'd shake your hand, they wouldn't let it go. They're like, "Oh man, you were so great! You were so great!" You know, like, and they mean it. You can tell they mean it.
Absolutely.
It's not lip service, you know. And And Ronnie would laugh and look at me and go, see, it doesn't take much, does it? And I'm like, no, it doesn't take anything.
Yeah.
This is not work, you know.
Yeah.
This isn't putting me out. This is not a problem, you know. So Ronnie and I, you know, always saw eye to eye pretty well on everything. And from the, you know, and when he left the band, I was out of the band within, you know, a month later, or a month and a half later. Like, I knew leaving Rainbow was a career killer. I knew that.
Was that your choice?
Well, yeah,
Okay.
it was. But I knew, I didn't do it right away because I knew it was going to be a career killer. I'm Canadian. For me to get back in the States or England, if I quit Rainbow, it's going to be really tough, if at all.
Oh,
if it ever, you know, if I ever get picked up. I mean, it would cost him probably $5,000 a year in legal fees to keep me working as a Canadian overseas, you know?
Wow.
Ronnie, one of his dreams was to own a Lincoln town car. He always dreamed of it as a little kid. When I grow up and I have enough money, I'm going to buy a Lincoln town car. So when he finally left Rainbow and went to go to California to go play with Black Sabbath, and he left with Wendy, he left with $5,000 in his pocket and the Lincoln, and that's it.
Wow.
But I tell you what, Scott, within a year, I was asked to join one of the greatest Canadian bands ever, and they were called Max Webster.
I was going to ask you about them.
And they had a guitar player who became famous as a solo guy after, named Kim Mitchell. Now, we did a show that's on YouTube. In Canada, it was the first, what was called a national simulcast. You could turn on your TV to, like in the United States, you have ABC and NBC and CBS. Canada, we have CBC and CTV. You would turn on your affiliate channel in whatever city you were in. You would turn into your local FM rock station and watch a live concert with great sound over your FM stereo in real time.
That's cool.
So they call that a simulcast.
Mm-hmm.
We did the first one ever, I think. Well, the Beatles did one in 1966. They were all in different cities all over the world. They did it with a teletype machine. But we did the first one in Canada, and now that's on YouTube. And it's Max Webster live at the Barrie Theater. It's Barrie. Now, when on that show, I played pretty damn good. And all my Canadian keyboard playing buddies were just blown away. That band was way more progressive, way more interesting, much more fiber musically. So if you ever want to see what I got up to after Rainbow, see if you can find that.
I'm going to hunt that down.
Yeah, Max Webster, MaxWebster, Max Webster, and it's live from the Barrie Theater, Barrie.
I'm going to hunt that down, and I'll put that in the show notes for everybody to check out.
Oh, it'll blow your mind. Like, I played 10 times better with them than I ever did with Rainbow.
Do you play better when you're more challenged?
Well, of course. I mean, come on, man. You know, it's like, how many times can you play 3 chords? Like, I'm sorry. You know, I grew up listening to jazz and classical, man. You know?
That's true.
I'm not used to hearing a guy play 96 Tears for half an hour or Wooly Bully. Like, come on, man. Sorry. When I heard Yes, Dude, Close to the Edge for the first time, I'm like, oh my God. Mm-hmm. There we go. Now we're talking.
For me, it was Emerson, Lake and Palmer playing Tarkus.
There you go. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Insane. And it's in 5/4, you know? 5/4. Like, wow, what fucking rock band plays in 5/4?
The sounds that they were coming up with were just amazing.
Well, he was the very first guy for you to hear commercially synthesizer.
That's right.
Lucky Man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It was before the invention of the mini Moog. You used the original Model 10, Robert Moog Model 10. They were meant for universities. They weren't meant for musicians. They were meant for electronic music studies in universities. It was a laboratory instrument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then there was an album called Switched On Bach.
Yes, I know that one.
Yeah. And it was the very first time anybody ever heard a synthesizer. Switched On Bach. Mm-hmm. And then next time anybody heard a synthesizer was the Beach Boys' Good Vibrations. You know, that thing that goes, ooh, that's a theremin. So, you know.
Is it really?
Yeah, that's a theremin.
Huh.
Oh, the Beach Boys were very progressive. A lot of people don't realize how progressive they were.
Yeah.
You know, they were really pushing the envelope all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Keith Emerson obviously was one of my fucking idols. You know, I learned the Tarkus riff. You know, and it's in fourth, so you have to do it with two hands. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I played it for Blackmore.
Wow.
I said, when I was auditioning, he said, play something. I said, well, have you heard that last album by Emerson and Palmer? And I did Tarkus. I went, and Cozy started playing along with me on drums in 5/4.
And the irony of that is he would go on to play with Emerson, Lake and Palmer a few years later.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, Cozy and I got along great. Actually, within about a week, less than 2 weeks of ever meeting him and knowing the guy, he always loved hot rods and motorcycles. I don't know if you know that. He had a Ferrari. So we're in LA, and I'm basically auditioning. Although, did I tell you that story? I was in the band and I didn't know it.
No, you didn't.
Didn't tell you that one. Well, it's within a. Oh yeah, I'm in the band and I don't know it. Okay, so I auditioned at the Columbia lot in Hollywood. They take me back to my hotel in Sunset Boulevard, Sunset Marquis. The next morning, I bump into Todd Rundgren in the hallway. I'm just, my mind is being blown by being in LA for the first time, you know, and you know, I tell people, oh, I'm working with Richie Blackmore, and everybody's like, oh wow. So I keep going, and I think I'm still auditioning. And one night after the rehearsal, Colin's driving me back to the hotel. And he said, well, we're going to fly you back to Canada for about a week, and then we're off to England. And I'm like, what, am I in the band? And he looks at me and goes, oh, didn't you know? You're in the band, by the way. And I'm 24 years old from Canada. You know, oh, they're going to fly you to England to rehearse at Shepperton, you know, where they made all the World War II movies. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, I guess I'm in the band then, eh? and that's your typical British sense of humor, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's funny.
Let the guy dangle for a week.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And then they told me who I was auditioning against. And the list was quite long. Eddie Jobson, who ended up in Asia, and some other bands in the UK. Mark Stein, the guy from Vanilla Fudge.
Yeah,
and Brian Eno.
No kidding.
Yeah, and there's some other guys, like really noted guys, you know?
Yeah, well, I know Richie was a huge fan of Vanilla Fudge, too, because that's who they patterned Deep Purple after in the beginning. Oh,
you put on a Vanilla Fudge record, you put on an early Deep Purple record, you can't tell the difference.
Exactly.
They sound, it's the same format. You got a good organ player, a good guy playing a hammond, and a good band with a great bass player. Tim, forget the bass player in Vanilla Fudge. And Tim Bogart. And he had a band called Vic Bogart and a Piece, with Carmen a Piece. But who I met later, I met Tim Bogart later. Actually asked me to be in a band with him. I'm like, sorry, man, I'm playing with Blackmore.
Well, I know you got to go, but I did want to ask you.
I do. I'm making my coffee to head out the door, and I'm having a ball.
Oh, me too. You mentioned Kim Mitchell when you were playing with Max Webster. Is that the Kim Mitchell that might as well go for a soda?
Yeah, that guy.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, this world's getting smaller and smaller.
Oh, yeah. And And his band, Max Webster, was loved Canada-wide. The reason why I jumped at the chance was like, this is the best Canadian band at the time. The best band. So if you see the Barrie show, you will understand.
I'm going to find it.
I know you will. You're a musician. You will immediately get it.
I'm sure I
will. You
will
will get it. Oh, because it's incredibly complex. Like a lot of guys can't play that. You'll see what I mean when you see it.
Well, it takes a certain focus and a certain amount of talent to be able to do that kind of music.
And study. Like, you gotta know, like there's books for this shit. You got, learn how to read music. It's gonna help. Trust me. I gotta let you go, Scott. You want to call me tomorrow?
I'm so glad we got to talk. I've got another session I'm doing tomorrow, but I'll text you and we'll find a time to continue the 60-part interview with David Stone.
Well, if you don't mind, I'm totally up for it, man. And good luck. I got to let you go.
Have a great night, my friend. We'll talk again soon. Is this guy not just a blast or what? I mean, I'm having so much fun talking to him and hearing these stories and finding out all these details. It's just been a joy, an absolute joy. This is an interview, like I said, I never thought I'd get. So I'm very happy that I got it, and I couldn't be happier about how these conversations are going. So tune in next week. I will have my review of the album Waterdog by AraPacis, and hopefully some more to come, and my interview with Michelle as well. So you guys have a great week. We'll see you next week on the Haskincast podcast. Cheers.